Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Progress on Purpose. Perfectionists, free yourself from the weight of expectations and move forward on what matters most. I'm your host, Caroline Garnett McGraw, and I am delighted to welcome our next guest, Krista O'Reilly Davy DeGuy. So, Krista, if you're here, come say hello. Big warm welcome to you.
Hey, I'm here.
Hello, it's so good to see you. Thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Well, everyone, Krista is a relatively new colleague and friend that I connected with during the book launch of You Don't Owe Anyone. A reader and actually a former coaching client of mine said, "Do you know about Krista? I feel like you should know each other." And so she did a very good matchmaking job for us.
Okay.
And Krista is a proud and affirming mom of 3, including her son who died by suicide in 2019. She is a writer and a joyful living educator living on Treaty 6 territory in central Alberta in Canada. Through story, grief, and trauma-informed education and brave community, Krista's work empowers midlife women to befriend their true selves, to walk in freedom and health and joy. So we're going to talk today about the hope map for hard times, which is so needed in our world today. But Krista, I'm going to ask you the same first question that I ask each of our experts today, which is, would you start with your story? What brought you to this place of doing the work you do now, creating the hope map? Why did you need a hope map is what I'm asking.
Well, that is a great question. Yeah, so I saw another fellow Albertan here. Hello. I was really young, around 10, the first time I realized that, or I had the thought that the world was too heavy for me. And I mean, 10-year-olds, they're little people. And I grew up in a home that was very concerned with equity, though they didn't use that word, in serving the community and the people who didn't have enough food. And I grew up learning about famine in Ethiopia and suicide rates in the neighboring Indigenous community. And we adopted kids who came from trauma. So I grew up in a family where there was a lot of compassion and goodness, and an amazing model of walking out your values, but not an example of emotional vulnerability. We talked about other people's hard things, all the big things in the world, but we didn't talk about our own emotional well-being. And between the ages of 14 and 18, I tried to die 3 times. I just felt like I don't fit. I knew I was loved. Nothing bad had happened per se. Like I felt like I didn't have what it takes to be in this world. And when I was 18 and the 3rd time I didn't succeed in dying, I realized it was too painful to try and have it not work. So I decided to live. And I didn't know how or what that meant, but I had made that decision. And so then came the next leg of my journey, where I tried to figure out how to be me in this world. And I say that really I was looking for freedom, but I kept picking up another set of chains because I had disordered eating. So I tried binge eating. I tried sex. I tried drinking and drugs. For a short time, I shut that down around 20 and stopped drinking and doing drugs. I just kept trying all these ways to find my safety. I didn't know it at the time, but now I know I was trying to feel safe in the world. And one of the things that I turned to was perfectionism. And again, I didn't know that. I couldn't have named that for you initially, right? But I discovered that it was my way of trying to feel safe in my body and life, ordering the things I could, where I had a measure of control, so that when the next really bad thing came, the next person died, the next thing that was really scary, I had at least prepared what I could. I learned in my early 30s that I was a highly sensitive human, thank gosh, for radio shows, because I learned about high sensitivity. I learned that I had lived from a young age with low-grade depression. I only actually way later learned that I had lived with quite severe anxiety since I was little, because when it's your norm, you don't know anything different. And if nobody's talking about these things, you don't know. So yeah, so I started to figure out that little by little that, okay, I'm not bad, wrong, or broken. I am, a highly sensitive human in a messy world where there's suffering and hurting. And I feel all these things, but I don't know what to do about it. Yeah, and so, years of growth work, years of healing, of stretching, of study. I really don't feel like I had anybody in my closer circles paving the way. This was work I did on my own. In some cases, asking for help from the medical system or my parents and not being heard. Yeah, so anyways, my children were definitely an incredible motivator, because I wanted better for them. And yeah, so, like a lot of us, we offer that which we've needed. And so the Hope Map specifically, it took me the first 7 years of my business, or 6.5, to really kind of see that this is just what I'm teaching over and over and over and over. And just say, okay, I'm focusing on this, I'm letting go of the rest, because this is the path I know. So
Yes. Thank you for that. And, something I want to highlight in your story is your willingness to share about your attempts on your own life, your son's suicide. Why has it been so important for you to talk openly about the grief and the trauma? Like, what is gained when we do that?
Well, I mean, if we talk about child loss, and specifically suicide loss, or even suicidality or anxiety and depression, there is a lot of shaming, a lot of stigma, a lot of isolation that happens, and I'm just unwilling to be part of that. We're human, and this world can feel harsh, and we're all doing our best with the resources we have, with the circumstances, the environments in which we are, and to figure out how to be human, how to do life in a way, and hopefully, and find a way to thriving. And there is zero shame in any of that. But I walked it firsthand. I walked my son's suffering and pain, and a lot of that was shame over being human. And not have, anyway. So if there's a taboo, I'm probably moving towards it, not away from it. So if there's something that is common, and I work with women, I work almost specifically. And if there's something that more than one of us is experiencing, then we need to be talking about it. So
thank you for that. Yes. And I echo Louise, my sincere sympathy for your loss. We have a compassionate group out here today. So thank you for that. So I want to ask too, when we spoke before, you were highlighting this idea, which I think is so important for recovering perfectionists, being in pain because of the story that we're telling ourselves in the hard time, which is something like, I'm doing it wrong, or I had this awful time, and now my day, my week, my year, it's ruined. Like it's all falling apart. So could you speak into that a bit? How do we how do we unravel those stories that make the hard times harder?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, so there's a lot of bits and pieces, but what we're talking about here is what I call making peace with paradox.
Mm,
So learning, and there's lots of threads of this, but I'll offer a few. So what I mean by making peace with paradox is that ability to hold two seemingly impossible or opposing truths at once. So joy and pain can coexist in my body and my life simultaneously. That's a big one.
mm,
Um, learning that, yeah, I am imperfect. There's no shame in that. And also, I'm gifted, I am loved, I am valued at once. Both can be true at once. In the worst winter season, so to speak, in the midst of trauma and deep grief, the idea, as an example, that my whole body, it can feel like my whole life, my whole self, I'm just pain. It's just pain. And that embracing or making peace with paradox can help us see that actually what's true is that there's this tiny little piece of me. It could be the tiniest little spark. And that piece knows beauty. And that piece can feel the happiness of being with my daughters after their big brother died. It's like it just cracks the door a little bit on a new possibility, that in the midst of heartache and pain and uncertainty and struggle and whatever else is going on, that there's this other space and they coexist. And as soon as our brain can grab hold of that seed of thought or possibility, it changes our life.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah. I mean, even just thinking about the experience of having my first child, I had a traumatic birth experience, which was really horrible. And then I'm having this incredible joy of holding this baby in my arms for the first time. And it was so confusing because I was like, I have been taught that these things cannot coexist. But
Right.
as you said, they surely can. That has
Yeah.
been our experience. So
So can I offer a couple other examples? Because I'm thinking I'll bring it back to make it like really practical, hopefully,
yes.
for a variety of people. So yes, so parenthood. Like, I am so grateful to be a parent. It was my primary dream to build a nest and be a mama. And I adore these humans that I get to share life with. And also, there's like some really, really hard moments and I just want to be alone. And I don't want anybody like talking to me or asking me for anything else. I want to be able to just put my needs first. And, both can be true at once. It doesn't make you a bad human. It makes you just human. And another example that I learned, I remember my son was around 10 at the time. And I remember learning that there was space between us. We weren't one entity. If he was having a mood or a feeling about something, it didn't have to impact me and it didn't have to impact my whole day. So if we had an hour that was hard, it didn't mean the whole day was hard, but my brain really thought that. Like a lot of us do, until we learn a new possibility, it's like we believe that. My whole life is hard, my whole day. And it's like, no, there's space there to see that this experience was hard. Yes, there's no denying that. Have all your feelings about it, truth tell. And the rest of it, there was a different experience. And that really helps us build resilience. So
I want to make sure that we introduce people to the idea of the hope map. So since they don't have a visual, it is a circle and it runs through the 4 seasons. And when I spoke with Krista at first, we agreed to focus in on the season of winter, which is the season of loss, for lack of a better word. So would you share a bit about, you know, what is required of us in winter when we're in a winter time where it's like, I don't see anything on the trees. I don't see hope right now. What does winter require of us?
Yeah. So there are different kinds of winter seasons, and some are a bit lighter than others, and some last for 3 days and some last for 3 years. And what we're talking about is inner seasons, sort of emotional, psycho-spiritual seasons. And we can be thrust from one into the next, right? So I was just kind of plodding along and then thrust deep into winter when my son died, as an example. I wasn't just plodding along, actually, because I knew we were trying to keep him alive, but whatever. So hopefully we put down deep roots before winter. At least we start the work, hopefully. But we're going to come around. We're going to keep moving through the different seasons of life, and we just are invited deeper into the work and into like freedom and wholeness and joy. And so winter, yeah, like if you live in a place like I do in Alberta, Canada, you know, and you have like these really distinct 4 seasons, it's stark, it's harsh, it's barren. And part of the work of winter is learning that this isn't only a place of suffering. This is not only a place that you just sort of like hold your breath until you get through as fast as you can. There is incredible beauty and also wisdom here too, as with every season. There's important work here. And it doesn't mean, you know, like we have to find neat purpose in suffering or any of that stuff. It just being human in this world, you're going to meet challenges, right? You don't have to go looking for them or hunting for them or romanticizing them.
They will come to you reliably. Yes.
So winter seasons are a time of, for sure, of deep inward work. So Michael Meade is, I love his work. He's a mythologist and a historian. So he, I believe it was him, he writes about slowing downward. And I love that so much. So this idea of kind of we're going inward and downward to the roots of our being. We're meeting our true selves. We're stripping away all of the noise, the conditioning, the stories, the trying to find our value outside of ourselves, etc. And we're really meeting the truth of who we are. And we're putting down these, you know, we've already hopefully started this work, but now these roots, they're going deeper and deeper. And it is paradoxical that, you know, like lately I've been saying that I believe actually it's in winter seasons above all that we encounter joy and freedom, not in summer, you know, not in the sparkle of spring, but actually in that place of winter. So there are, you know, various things. So part of winter is practicing imperfect action. So, you know, in winter seasons, we tend to have limited capacity. So we can't do all the things, and we have permission to strip away and do less of pouring ourselves out for others at our own expense and more like, really, what do I need? How do I stay anchored and stable here? So can we talk about hope for a second? Because I feel like my mind is swirling with lots of things to say, and that feels good to me. Yeah.
Please do. I trust you.
Okay. So I just shared this on a different call, but hope is not fairy dust. Hope is a realistic frame of mind that allows us to see a new possibility. And 2 key characteristics are agency, power of choice, the power to choose my response, and pathways, the ability to see different pathways forward. And those 2 things are also a key of resilience. So winter, you can think about it as a time of putting down those deep roots that hold you fast, but also of hope in action. It's actually a place of not only where we encounter joy and freedom, but it's a birthplace of new vision, of envisioning a new possibility. It's not the time to act. It's not a season of building and creating. It's a time of listening, of deep listening and honoring what we hear and capturing it and grieving and sifting. But I like to talk about hope in action because people assume that it's just an emotion, but it's not. It's as I mentioned, it's an attitude of mind, a realistic attitude of mind, and it requires movement. So that movement can be inching forward. It can be asking for help and other people come alongside you and hold you up as you limp along. But it requires not only the little spark of new possibility and that knowing somehow that you have agency, and then that flexible thinking that knows I don't have to know how to get there, but I know there are different paths to joy, different paths to a brave and beautiful life. And then some form of movement, some form of action.
There's so much richness there. Oh my goodness, frog in my throat. I wanted to ask specifically about that phrase you used, permission to strip away. I think that's really interesting. That's an overlooked gift, I guess, of being in winter. It's watching the old fall away. So I want every one of our listeners, think about just for a moment, what do you need to give permission to fall away in your life right now? And put it in the chat. You know, what do you need to let go of? What do you need to allow to fall away? I will share for me, I need to allow the taking on too much and overwork to fall away. That is a pattern I need to allow. Sharon says self-judgment, she needs to allow to fall away. I know someone else spoke about eating disorders and allowing the lack of self-acceptance to fall away. Let go of failing. Yes. And Krista, I wondered if you could speak to, as these replies are coming in, you know, what helps with this process of the falling away? Like, what do you see come up for people, for women, as they're in this stripping away process?
A lot of guilt, shame, and judgment tend to come up. So for instance, the question, isn't it selfish to have a boundary? Am I allowed to even consider putting my needs first? Like that just goes so countercultural. Like it's just so against the religious, societal, often familial belief system that we've been handed. And I don't think this can be rushed. I think it has to be explored. So, you know, what I think is really important is that we give ourselves the space to do the grief work, to grieve, to sift, to truth tell, like I was saying, because we often want to bypass, and that's just another part of this hustle culture that tells us more and faster is better. So if we notice urgency, if we notice like we want to bypass, I would say use that as a clue to just slow down. And learn to just name what's coming up for you without needing to fix it. You know, we often think we have to fix everything about life and ourselves, but most of the things actually don't need fixing, they need witnessing. So part of healing, healing, growing, stretching, it requires an empathetic witness.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And we can't always do it for ourselves. We need each other. And so, you know, I would say get anchored into healthy community. And it could be one other person. It could be a therapist with whom you feel safe. It could be a friend who is capable of holding space for you in the season, because just because she loves you doesn't mean she's capable right now.
That's right.
And often if we're in really deep, dark winter seasons, our best friends and our partner, often they're not the ones that can do this with us because it's too big and too scary. So we need to go outside of them and find other places that are safe, a grief circle, trauma therapy, whatever. And we can notice the urge to always have to fix ourselves, and we can learn how to just name it, because those urges to fix, just like perfectionism or numbing through alcohol or drugs or anything else, it's just one more way of trying to avoid the pain, the discomfort. And so a lot of the work of winter is to learn how to be in the discomfort and know it cannot kill me. It feels like it will.
Yes.
But it won't.
Yes.
But get anchored into community.
I want to highlight with the community piece, there's a quote I absolutely love from a trauma researcher, Judith Herman. And she says the unit of physical survival is 1, but the unit of psychological survival is 2, because we need a witness. Exactly to your point. I also love your point that fixing can be avoidance, which is, it's not how our brains think of it. It's like, I used to come to my therapist and I would tell this whole story and be like, how do I fix it? That was always my question. How do I fix it? And she would just sort of gently look at me and be like, what if you don't need to? And I would be like, I don't need to fix it. What do you mean? It feels so uncomfortable. And exactly to your point of like, okay, let's sit in that for a minute. And it didn't kill me.
Yeah. I just want to say, like, one of the people who commented said apathetic witness, but it's actually empathetic. Empathetic witness. Yeah. Yes. Just to clarify. Yeah. And, because when we're in winter seasons and there's a lot of truth telling happening, and that can come with a lot of pain, big feelings. And another thing is that other people will try to fix us too. So that's another reason why we need to be really wise about where we're going for that community. Because, for instance, if you're grieving and you're grieving a child loss, or you're grieving death by suicide, people don't know how to do this. In Western culture, we don't know how to do this grief thing. And we end up harming each other and causing more isolation. And one of the ways we do that is by trying to fix. But when we do that, so if you're the one and you've noticed that you've tried to do that, say it's going to be okay, they're in a better place, blah, 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 blah. Notice that isn't for the grieving person, that's for you, because this is so hard to stay in the grief with somebody that you want to feel better. And I'm not saying this with judgment. I've done this and I've experienced it.
Yes.
So there's a whole lot of fixing that can happen. And I would say, like, when we find grief and trauma informed spaces, we don't try to fix each other, because there is no fixing. There's no fixing that my son died. There is no fixing. There is only witnessing and being with me as I figure out how to navigate it, how to keep living and thriving. So it is an incredible gift to offer each other if we can notice the urge and step back. And treat yourself like a friend too, and notice when you feel like I got to fix, myself, and say, well, maybe I don't, maybe I can witness. So.
Yes. So well said. And I want to invite everyone, if what Krista has shared is landing with you, if you are going through a winter season and a hard time, I see several people in the comments saying, I relate, this is me, I'm getting this. I want to invite you to get her 24 milestones along the path to joy, the Hope Map assessment. So this is essentially, where are you on the Hope Map, so that you can know what your next step is and what is normal even for that season, because what's normal for one season it's different. They differ from each other, obviously. So Krista said it beautifully, map a soul honoring path forward. So we have that link in the chat for you right now. So go take your Hope Map assessment. And Krista, I just want to leave space. Is there anything you would like to share with the group before we say goodbye? Because we've gleaned so much from you. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, two things, and I'll try to be fast. One is
Mm.
when you go to the assessment and you see these milestones, there may be a feeling of overwhelm. And there's, you know, you may feel like one person may feel like, oh yeah, I know a lot of this. And one person may feel like, oh my gosh. It's not good or bad. These are simply practices or tools that can support you. Doesn't mean you have to do all of them tomorrow. It's only about just figuring out, okay, this is kind of where I am, because if we don't know where we are, we can't carve a path forward. So just please be kind to yourself if you notice a sense of like overwhelm. You know, something that I probably say a lot would be simply to anybody here, if life feels messy for you, or if you're struggling right now, you're not doing life wrong. This is normal. This is just what it means to be human in a messy world. Life isn't supposed to be linear, neat and tidy, perfectly put together. We do not live in a perpetual summer, and we're not meant to. So if it feels messy and you feel sometimes like, oh, I can't keep up and, you know, I'm always behind or whatever, it's not about you. It's about this culture that tells you you should be different than you are. So really that's what I have to leave you with.
Thank you, Krista. There is such deep kindness in that. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for your wisdom. Thank you for coming to talk to us today.
Thanks for having me, and hello to all the people saying hi.